Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Royal One podcast, the podcast that empowers you to discover your purpose, embrace your identity, and engage faith tenaciously. I'm your host, Dr. Lysandra Barnes, life coach, Bible teacher, author, speaker, and founder of Royal One Enterprise, which is a women's empowerment company. I am so very excited to be with you all, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. In this episode, we are going to be talking about all things relationships. I have with me a special guest, Frank Ivey, who is a husband, a relationship coach, and the co-founder of Creating Forevers with his wife, Jasmine Ivey. We are going to be talking about transformation in relationships when couples are transparent and open. So you already know this is going to be an amazing episode. So are you guys ready to go on a journey of empowerment? Then let's go. Hey, Frank, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yes, I am definitely honored. Thank you so much for, reaching out and allowing me to be a part of what you're doing. I think it's so great that, you're incorporating different aspects of life, but you're keeping, God at the center of it all. And I love the kingdom work that you're doing here.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like God called me to do this podcast in the pandemic. And I was like, Lord, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is a stretch. Like, I like to preach, but I don't know nothing about a podcast. Not a thing. But you know what? I took the leap of faith and I was trying to figure out what my angle was going to be. I wanted to stay true to myself and what God had called me to. And I was like, why not package it all in this one podcast? So we're not focused on just one thing, but it's like every aspect of our lives needs to be discussed. And I love to do that with this platform. And I've had some amazing guests. I've done some amazing work, and I'm just looking forward to see what God has going on in the future.
So amazing.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know I just gave a few things, but we would love to hear more about who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I am a husband, first of all. I am also a relationship coach, also an educator. And me and my wife, we own a relationship coaching business called Creating Forevers. And majority of what we do is we work with couples to put them through a 12-week program. And that program digs into every aspect of relationship. And we really want couples to lead with a solid foundation. They may not have everything figured out, but they have a solid foundation on how to tackle relationships and, hence the name Create Forever. So that's pretty much what we do with our relationship coaching business.
Awesome. Awesome. So would you say that is your purpose or would you say you have a different purpose?
I would say in this season of my life, I definitely feel like God has called me to be a relationship coach, to be a relationship educator, and to use my marriage as a ministry to help others. I'm a big believer of the saying, each one teach one. And I've never been one to withhold knowledge of any kind. If I know how to do something and I see somebody that's struggling, I'm definitely willing to give away that knowledge for free. And the short time that I have been married, I've learned so much. I went through premarital counseling, and not only that, me and my wife has done a number of workshops and seminars on marriage and relationships and getting certified as a relationship coach that I was like, I cannot hold this information to myself. Like it's so many couples struggling, like if only they knew. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing that kind of triggered us to create our relationship coaching business. It was just like other people need to know. They got to know. This could help so many people.
Mm-hmm. So give us 3 practical steps to be open. Like, because everybody talks about they want to be in a relationship. We know that the relational business is booming. Everybody wants to be a coach. Yeah. Everybody wants to give advice. Everybody wants to have this, ideal relationship with #relationship goals. So one of the main problems we see is that nobody wants to be open, honest, or transparent. So can you give us 3 tips on how to do that?
So the first step in being open and being vulnerable is let ego go. Put ego aside. A relationship it's not a competition. Mm-hmm. And so many times we come to relationships with, this idea of I'm going to do this, I do this better than you and you need to depend on me for this. We may not consciously say those things out loud, but subconsciously we're thinking those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times that when we let ego go, once ego is gone, we're able to open up and kind of share our true feelings and our true emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And once we let ego go, that's the second thing is being transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of things and a lot of conversations that is had in relationships is very surface level.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even our arguments become very surface level. It's like we're arguing about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're transparent and we're vulnerable, we're showing our partner our raw side, our true feelings. Then we got something to argue about. We can kind of settle on something there. We can come to a compromise, come to an agreement. And these actions, and the third thing is to reciprocate your partner's actions. So these first two actions becomes reciprocal in our relationship. Nobody wants to be the first one in the relationship to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to show that side of them. Nobody wants to talk about their insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I tend to look at vulnerability as a form of leadership. As the husband in my household, you know, I'm the first one to be vulnerable. I'm going to set that example so I can have that reciprocated in my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you started being more transparent and becoming more vulnerable and practicing that, it becomes easier. And then, we kind of start getting to the root of things.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of arguing about socks on the floor, that argument becomes something deeper from your childhood. Maybe you was treated unfairly and you was, forced to clean more when you was a child or something like that. So once we become vulnerable and transparent, it kind of open our insecure spaces up, but it allow our partner into those insecure spaces so they can become secured spaces. So all the things that we was insecure about, we now create a space to share that so our partner can build us up in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to be a person who was kind of insecure about my looks.
Mm-hmm.
In conversation with my partner about these things, I got some reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that insecurity is now something I'm very secure in my look now. Like I know I look good. And
Come on now. Come on now. Come on, confidence.
But in all seriousness, this is definitely what it takes. Stepping up and showing leadership with your vulnerability, and trusting that your partner is going to receive it. Once your partner receive it, like I said, you allow them into your insecurities, and together y'all work on that with God, and you just build it up. And the more you conversate and the more you talk about it, the more you open and transparent, the more spaces you allow your partner into. And so now you begin to fill all the holes and gaps in your relationship, and you begin to unload some of the baggage you brought from past relationships and from your childhood, and the whole dynamic of the relationship change. And now you're like, I don't even know why we was arguing about that. And that, I don't know, I could go forever talking about, because this is something that like I said, I personally dealt with.
Yeah.
For me and I think men in general, being vulnerable, it's like, oh heck no. Men is taught don't show emotion. And at first, I felt naked, like to share something that I'm dealing with personally that I'm insecure about with my wife. It's like, and I'm the man. I'm like, I can't share this. Like, really, God, you want me to share this? And so I don't know. I think, like I said, looking at it as leadership, especially for men, is definitely something that helped me, and I've seen it help other men.
Oh my goodness. First of all, I'm over here writing a ton of notes because you are dropping. So I'm like, okay, let me write this down real quick. Let me get a note of this. I love that you said that you look at vulnerability as a form of leadership. That I have never heard that before. And I absolutely love that, because if you can lead with vulnerability, that changes the relationship, because it creates that safe space to then start talking about, those tougher issues. But I have a question for you. I was in this singles group and they said, what is the problem that you keep running up against when you're dating? And somebody said that they tell too much too soon. So,
Okay.
with you saying that vulnerability is a necessary asset for a healthy relationship, and for that person that's struggling, like as soon as I meet somebody, I just start sharing all my trauma, I share all my business, and it just doesn't work. Like people leave me. So, can you tell us how to share or be vulnerable in a healthy space?
Okay, yeah. So first, one thing I want to kind of unpack the dating space real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And when going into dating, I think that it's important to get to know that person and to kind of let some conversations happen naturally.
Mm.
And in that, when you're dating, date with intentions. Date with intentions of seeking a forever partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that process, if we're dating and we're seeking, a forever partner, and we're letting conversation happen naturally, I think it's important to share the things that you are comfortable sharing at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are dating a person who is more comfortable sharing some things that is more vulnerable to you, I think it's also important to just during that conversation try to put yourself in your partner's shoes
Mm.
and see what they're seeing in you that
Mm-hmm.
makes it comfortable for them to share. A lot of times I think that can kind of scare off, especially a strong woman.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it's you have to look at yourself and say, what are they seeing in me that makes them comfortable around
Mm.
me?
Mm-hmm.
And so just having that conversation about what are you comfortable with is kind of like that process of setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
The first step of setting boundaries is how you treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How you treat yourself, your partner is going to reciprocate that. But the second part of that is talking about comfortable spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So those are definitely two conversations that should be had in the dating phase. Especially, like I say, if you're dating with the intent to seek a forever partner, definitely have those conversations early on, as early as possible.
So, okay, that's great. But what about that person that is still wounded? I deal with this a lot. And I have to tell people that you don't have healthy boundaries because I just met you. You need to save this for date 4. Like, please. Like, I shouldn't know what happened in 3rd grade when he pushed you off your bike. So, how do you know when it's time to share? Because, yes, I'm an amazing person. Yes, we're on a date. You're excited. And you feel like I just need to tell you. It's that person that's like, I better tell you everything up front so you just won't be surprised. How do you tell that person to slow it down a bit so that it's okay to be open and transparent, but at the same time, I think you need a therapist instead of a date? Like, how do you differentiate them?
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. And so, like I was saying about having the conversations about comfort level,
Mm-hmm.
you have to voice it and let them know what you're comfortable with. So many times that people have had heartbreak
Mm-hmm.
and so many people walk out of their lives for things that they feel they need to share
Mm-hmm.
to let you know up front. And so it's important that both people that are dating too kind of say, hey, let's become friends first.
Mm.
Let's see how this friendship go. And then once we're comfortable at this stage, let's start talking about, some things that we're going to have a conversation on before we get married, especially like childhood things, past relationships. The process of emotional unloading, it comes from fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so fear fuels a lot of things in our lives. If I'm dating someone and I'm fearful of rejection or I'm fearful of somebody walking out of my life again,
Mm-hmm.
I want to let them know the baggage that I come with so they can know whether they want to stay or go to keep me from getting hurt later down the road. So emotional unloading is becoming more common. And I don't know if it's because of this like shaming culture, culture of counseling people, calling people out, but it's creating an anxiety around dating like never been seen in years. And I think a lot of this emotional unloading is coming from that anxiety that's being built in society today.
Are you interested in starting a podcast but feel overwhelmed because you don't know where to start? That's where Buzzsprout comes in. It's the easiest and best place to begin. The team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. You'll get a great-looking podcast website, audio players that you can drop into other websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening, tools to promote your episodes, and more. Buzzsprout gets your show listed in every major podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners. So follow the link in my show notes and let Buzzsprout know that I sent you, and you'll get a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and it also helps to support my show. Welcome back to the show. Let's jump back into the conversation with Frank. But I think we want to really spend a lot of time focusing on marriage. People know how to date or how to get married, but they don't know how to stay married. So let's talk about, how do you stay married? So now somebody said, I'm married. I've been married. The first year I heard is the hardest year of being married because you're two selfish people trying to become one, and they come and seek you. At what point of their marital relationship would you have a couple coming to see you to get some kind of guidance?
So we have a lot of couples that come for communication problems. And a lot of times we kind of unpack and we kind of look at the couple individually. And a lot of time it's a singleness problem. And they haven't learned to appreciate themselves in their singleness. And a lot of times it's things that could have been worked on through personal development. And these issues, they kind of roll over into marriage because I haven't learned how to fully love myself and make myself happy. So now I need to find someone that makes me happy. And so I'm putting the responsibility on my partner to make me happy. And so now my partner is feeling the pressure because the conversation keep coming up that we never do this anymore. You never say this anymore. You never do this the way we used to do this before. And because the pressure was there to make each person happy. And a lot of times we have to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of personal development to get in the thing that God has for us, to get in our calling. And, God will put us in a place and he'll put parameters around us in a place that we need to operate in to use our gifts. And so many times we get, being single associated with loneliness. And so once we start associating these two things together, it then becomes a responsibility of somebody else to fill the void that we didn't feel while we were single. And so a lot of times we'll see where these couples who have a lot of that inner work to do, they have never been single longer than 6 weeks or a few months. And so they don't know who they themselves are. They don't know how to take their pain, internalize it, and to seek God for that inner healing that they need. And so it shouldn't be your partner's responsibility to bring you happiness. It should take two fully developed individuals that is seeking after God, seeking what God has for them to do if they have not received it from him yet,
Mm-hmm.
and operating in their calling. And then when they come together, they are tied into the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have done the inner work. And so that is the biggest thing. Like, if we can begin to get more of that, inner work done
Mm-hmm.
before we enter into marriage, we are more developed into be in tune with our emotions, and we can have emotionally intelligent conversations
Mm-hmm.
about our childhood, about our past relationships. And then it doesn't feel like dumping. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like reciprocation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the biggest things I think that we miss the mark on when it comes to marriage, is thinking that marriage equals happiness
Mm-hmm.
and marriage equals exposure. If you wasn't a happy person before marriage and you're fake happy,
Mm-hmm.
marriage is gonna expose that. If you was an insecure person before marriage and you're faking Mr. or Mrs. Independent,
Mm-hmm.
marriage is gonna expose that too. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that, when you're dating or even engaged, you can go back home.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're married, you're laying beside that person every night. And if something is off, something is wrong, they're going to know it. The second thing I would say is going back to, we have this acronym that we use for our communication process. It's called HOT communication. And it's humble, open, transparent, and trusting communication. And once we get hot in our communication, we're humble. And humility is a great thing to marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can mimic the grace of God in our marriage and in our conversation, that humbleness,
Mm-hmm.
it creates the space to be open and transparent. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's no ego, it's no pointing fingers, it's no you should have did this or you should have said that. We're creating a space that is gracefully here for us to be open and us to be transparent. If you think about a spa, it's more open, it's more relaxed, and you're inclined to kind of let your mind wander and relax, and you may even fall asleep at a spa. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you create that grace like feeling in your relationship, especially in your conversations and your communication, the pressure is gone. So now we feel free to be open and
Mm-hmm.
we feel free to be transparent, no judgment zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are two things. I think personal development and having hot communication is definitely major items for building healthy relationships. And a thing for us is that we incorporate God in every aspect of our relationship. And so, a lot of times you don't realize how much your intimate relationship with God
Mm-hmm.
can improve your intimate relationship with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got into a more intimate relationship with God,
Mm-hmm.
my spiritual discipline increased.
Mm-hmm.
And, that flowed over into my relationship with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's easier for me to be more intimate in that relationship because I've already set that standard in my relationship with God.
That's good. That is so good. Because I think a lot of times people go into a marriage and they lose themselves. And they do think that the other person is supposed to just be their knight in shining armor. And then they're the morning, the moon, the stars, the sun. They complete them. It's just this
Yeah.
whole thing. And then they lose their independence. So, how important is it to keep your independence in a marriage?
Oh, it is so important. If you think about it, putting that much pressure on someone, you begin to look at them as being a perfect person.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all imperfect. We are going to make mistakes and we all sin and fall short of his glory.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times, we tend to look at, I have the perfect wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is the perfect wife for you, but your wife is also going to sin and fall short of the glory.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to fall short of the glory of God, they're going to make some mistakes and disappoint you along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand how that process works in your relationship with yourself and in your relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not overly expecting something out of your partner.
Is that speaking to like the unrealistic expectations that you have
Yeah,
in your mind of what you expect a wife to do or a husband to do? And when they're not
yeah.
meeting them, that's where we're having this disconnection.
So true. Yeah. And we call it unspoken expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's us just coming to the relationship with the assumption that your partner already know what you're thinking in your mind is the perfect partner, the perfect way that you want things done, and you never voiced it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I was going back to saying, like, the relationship you have with yourself
Mm-hmm.
sets a standard for how you're going to be treated and loved in your relationship, because your partner is going to reciprocate that. You also have to set the standard of expectations. So if the expectation is never spoken,
Mm-hmm.
your partner can't read your mind, so they're not going to know how to fulfill your needs or the things that you're wanting in the relationship. And so many times our expectations go unspoken for so long that
Mm-hmm.
it turns into resentment.
Mm.
And we end up, having this cycle of an argument that we don't even know where it started, where it comes from. And it's that, see, that's what I'm talking about when you do that. That's what I'm talking about. Why you always,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, what are you talking? Who's just here having a nice dinner? What is going on? It's
Mm-hmm.
that unspoken expectation that you were not voicing to your partner.
Wow. So that's where that vulnerability and being open, that's where that comes into place. You can say, hey, this
Yeah.
is what I need. This is what I'm not getting. Let's have a conversation. That makes so much sense. I think about my sister. They've been married for 20 years and they talk about like a check-in system where they say, percentages of how far are you in the relationship right now. I'm this percentage in, or, I'm that percentage in. And then we have to
Yeah.
figure out a plan as to how do we balance it out to get us back to a good space. And I think that was so important because a lot of times if you never say where I'm at, because in my mind, if I'm only at 10% in this marriage and I'm not saying it, then you're going to get those nagging moments. You're going to get that anger, you're going to get that
Yeah.
resentment because I haven't told you what I feel. But if I'm
So true.
50% in or wherever, like no one's checking in and then we just see this thing falling apart, but we don't know how to get it back on track. So I
Yeah.
think that that's important.
Yeah. No, a lot of times couples will say, well, I just don't know what to say to let them know how I feel, or I don't know what to say when they do this. And, just a simple conversation starter. You can say, when you blank, I feel this.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one conversation starter that really it go ahead real quick and get the vulnerability started. It's like a Venus flytrap for vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
When you blink, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Right then and there, yes, you're being open, you're being vulnerable. Just in that one statement. And if the conversation doesn't go much farther, you became vulnerable. You let them know how you felt, and 9 times out of 10, your partner is they're gonna reciprocate that action, or they're gonna show you that they care, but they don't know exactly how to express it.
Mm.
And so just practicing being vulnerable with small things. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be things in a relationship. Just letting them know how you feel about your appearance or how you feel about public speaking or anything like that. Just practicing that, it's going to make it so comfortable for when you have to have a very vulnerable conversation in your
Mm-hmm.
relationship. Just practicing being vulnerable.
This is so good. I am so enjoying this conversation. This is so good. This is
Thank you
so,
so much.
you are bringing so much knowledge here. So
That's awesome.
we're talking about being open and transparent and being vulnerable. Has the conversation about the 5 love languages, has that ever come up in your relationship coaching sessions?
Yeah, definitely. We actually did an entire series on this over on our Instagram page, and breaking down how each couple show love and receive love
Mhm.
it was very eye opening for us, and it also has been very opening for other couples because lots of couples was asking for examples.
Mhm.
And so we started going back and, adding examples to, how to express your partner's love language. And that's another one of those unspoken expectations that is being exposed. And so, which is a good exposure. And so once you learn the 5 love languages and you figure out what your love language is and what your partner's love language is, it's also important to look at that secondary love languages, because you have a primary love language and a secondary love language. And sometimes your partner is trying to express that love language through your primary one, when sometimes it can be easier to express that love through that secondary language. An example I'll give is, let's say somebody's primary love language is words of affirmation, and their second love language is physical touch. Doing conversation, it may be a tough conversation and you can't provide words of affirmation in that conversation. So you can, hold a person's hand, put your hand on their thigh, and that's just expressing their love language, and it's comforting them during the time that they need it. And so I think love language is really important. I think everybody should take the assessment and read the book. We probably did the love languages quiz like back in college. And so, we took it again last year, and our love languages was the same. But what we have learned with working with couples is that your love language can change, or your primary love language can shift to your secondary love language, and your secondary love language can switch to your primary love language, especially depending on the season you're in your relationship, or the season you're in your life. So it's important to know. I feel like it's major. It's a major key for relationships.
Wow. I know I was introduced to the 5 love languages by the love languages of God. So Gary Chapman wrote the 5 love languages of God. And so I read that first. And that's why I was introduced to it. And I was like, what? Like, okay, I didn't know I could, experience God with the 5 love languages. Like, okay,
yeah,
this is great. And then I was like, wait, what are mine? So then I'm like going through this. And then I read the regular 5 love languages. And I was like, yeah, this is more for married people. I'm not going to read this one. So I'm going to go. And then he got 5 love languages for everybody. 5 love languages for kids. 5 love languages for singles. 5 love languages for teens. I was like, this is great.
Yeah, he
So
does.
I did find the 5 love languages for singles to be really good. So it works not only in those romantic relationships, but it works well in your family dynamics with your friends. Like, it really helps people to understand. Because I know for me, my number one is quality time. And so I'm like, you don't love me if we don't hang out. So you can save everything you're saying. And no, I don't.
You don't
send
love
me
me because you
nothing.
keep counseling on me.
Right. No, if we are not hanging out and you are not spending time with me, you don't love me. Forget it. I don't care what you say. And I'm like, that's true. My friends, we have to hang out. So once I start incorporating into all my other relationships, I said, okay, then how do you need to feel loved? And I think one other thing about that is important is that sometimes we know our love languages and we know their love languages. But can you talk about how sometimes people may use their love languages to show the other person love?
Yeah. And so, that's one of the major things with the book. We know what our partner's love language is, but we never have the conversation to ask them, what actions I do cause you to feel most loved? And it's like, oh, I was thinking more hugs because I'm a physical touch guy. And I thought, so if I give you more hugs, you'll feel more love. And no, I need words of affirmation. And so you can, as your partner, what things I say to make you, feel most love if your love language is words of affirmation. And so even after you learn your love languages, it's so important to have a conversation about them. Because if we don't get clarity, and my wife is big on this, when we have conversations or we communicating about anything, we have to have a clarity session at the end. 5 minutes of, are you sure this is like this? Okay, so you said this. Am I hearing you correctly? And a clarity session, after you love your learned languages can be very powerful. So you can say, if your love language is physical touch, So you're saying when I do this, this, and this, it makes you feel love. Is this what you're saying? Your partner will say yes or no. If it's no, then they can go ahead and tell you. So it's no more unspoken expectations around love language. So I think that would be powerful to have a clarity session after you and your partner have learned your love languages. Or I think it's powerful to revisit the love language because, like I say, I have seen where it changes for couples.
That's really good. Rejected to Accept It is an empowering guide to wholeheartedness. This book explores the personal triumphs and struggles I faced while embarking on my self-discovery journey after experiencing fatherlessness, domestic violence, and a series of failed and unhealthy relationships. More than a memoir, Rejected to Accept It empowers the reader to overcome the crippling effects of rejection and domestic violence. You learn how to love yourself and others the way God intended and create healthy patterns for future relationships. This book provides hope and inspiration. Maybe you have personal experiences that left you heartbroken or questioning your worth. Rejected to Accept It will encourage you to allow Jesus to repair the shattered pieces of your heart with the glue of his love. Rejected to Accept It is available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com in both paperback and ebook formats. Now, let's take it a little more personal. Tell us a little bit about you and your wife. How long have you been married? What do you love about her? What do you love about your marriage? Just kind of tell us more about that.
Okay. Oh, man, my wife is so amazing. Okay, so we have been together for over 14 years. We are middle school sweethearts.
Wow.
Yeah. So God led us to the same college. We were supposed to be at two separate colleges, but God led us to the same college. And at college, we were really in a space where it was a time for us to work on ourselves and our relationship with God. And I know that was one of the biggest contributors to how we handle our marriage today. Just having parents who is so in tune with their relationship with God and, educating us on the word of God that, we had those tools to take with us to that college setting. And so after college, we went to separate grad schools. And so we was in a long distance relationship. And so I think God put that season there for us to work on our communication. Because, if somebody is 500-600 miles away, all you have is communication.
That's it.
So for 2 years of grad school working on our masters, we was put in that season long distance. And so, I know God was setting up our marriage then to be a ministry. But yeah, my wife, she is a powerhouse. She's a nurse. She has her master's in clinical nurse leadership. So she's a leader, and I'm also a leader. And I think God has just put two incredible leaders together. My wife is a person who is a friend to everybody. And she loves the details about things. That is so important to keep me grounded in the relationship because I'm like, oh, look at this. Oh, check this out. We can do this. And so, in a marriage, I think it takes balance. My wife has seen insecurities in me that I would have never seen. And so a real godly marriage, that's what it's going to do. It's going to expose you, but it's also going to expose you in a way to make you better. Sometimes we find ourselves kind of comparing ourselves to others. My wife like, why are you doing that? You don't normally do that. Or you comparing yourself to them. I'm like, no, I'm not. What you talking? But that's the space that we have created in our marriage. And I'm so thankful to God for us being able to create that space. And, these are the things that we share with couples, that we share with people that we coach, we share on our Instagram page, because it's not only happening to us to grow us, it's happening to us to use our marriage as a ministry. But yeah, together for 14 years, and we've been married going on only 2 years.
Okay.
We had a 2 year engagement, and so yeah, it's it's been an amazing journey. And in those 14 years, we are still learning so much about each other. We're still
Yeah.
learning so much about marriage and about our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thank God for it being such an amazing journey.
Awesome. Awesome. So, well, I think we kind of talked about this already, but now we've talked about being transparent, open, honest, love languages, vulnerability. So, what are some practical steps that you would give to singles preparing to date or in a relationship? What would you tell them now that you've gone through all of this? You've seen all these relationships, you've seen it all. What do they need to know?
So I would say the relationship with yourself and with God comes first. They are equally as important. And that personal development and the working on yourself is one aspect,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to love yourself
Mm-hmm.
and to forgive yourself
Now that's big.
is very important. And until we learn to forgive ourselves of some things that we're holding in our heart and we're holding in our mind, we're never gonna have true freedom
Mm-hmm.
in our relationship with ourselves. And like I said, our relationship with ourselves and the way we love ourselves and show our self-love, that set the standard. That's the first boundary in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
If you negative self-talk, your partner is going to reciprocate that. Now you got a negative space in your relationship. And
Mm,
so once we learn to get in tune with that relationship with ourselves and our relationship with God, we are practicing how to be intimate with our partner by getting in an intimate space with God,
mhm,
by worshiping, by, meditating on his word,
mhm,
not only reading it, but really meditating on what the word says about us and who we are and whose we are.
mhm,
So those two is definitely number one.
mhm,
After that, you're going to get in a space where you're going to allow your gift to be used to upbuild the kingdom,
mhm,
because God put us in a space to use our gift, and he put parameters around us, and he put us in a space where, he may say, you need to move to this city
mhm,
to do this job to
mhm,
minister to these people.
mhm,
And we have to be obedient. And a lot of times we're more obedient to that versus when God say you have to stay here.
mhm,
You have to do this job. I know you have this degree, but I need you in this, operating in this area. And that becomes harder for us to accept.
mhm,
And so spending that time and seeking out God is that's gonna allow us to develop that intimate relationship with him. Then I say, you know what? You find your thing and keep running your race that God has for you.
mhm,
Do not slow down for somebody else. You
mm,
want to keep running, and you
mhm,
want to look to the left or the right of you and find somebody that is just as self-confident as you,
mhm,
has just a stronger relationship with God as you, and who is serious about using their gift as you are.
mm,
That's gonna make the dating process, so much better,
mhm,
because now you're not trying to tell someone why you spend so many hours on this,
mhm,
or you're not trying to explain someone that God laid this on my heart to do this, and this is
mhm,
why we can't do this today, because this is my assignment from God. And that you have a partner that has those same ambitions and those same goals, and they have a mighty work to do from God. And so now it becomes such a much more understanding relationship.
mhm.
So
Oh,
that's my advice. That's how, if I was single, I would definitely work more on the relationship with myself and operate in my calling quicker, and just, keep moving forward, and trust God to place that partner to be running beside me just as fast as I am.
singles, take note because he is dropping it. He is dropping gems left and right, left and right. Now, we cannot leave our married couples out. We cannot leave them out. I want you to speak to that couple that is struggling right now with their communication. They don't know how to get off of this pivot. They're at this point where they don't know what to do. Can you speak life into them in this moment?
Yeah, what's coming to me right now is let it go. And not only let what you're dealing with go, but let the past hurt go.
Mm.
Let the expectations of past relationships go. Let the expectations from social media and movies go.
Mm-hmm.
Because every relationship has a uniqueness about it. And that's one of the things we do when we start working with couples. We find that unique thing about them. And they say, oh, this is y'all unique thing that y'all bring to your relationship. Let go and forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Create a space of grace in your relationship. Out of that space of grace, it's going to be much more easier to deal with some of these things that we feel is intolerable to us right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's intolerable to us because we haven't given grace to it.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been in our partner's shoes and seen it from their point of view. And so I would say let it go, create a space of grace, and revisit it, mimicking God's grace that, he has blessed us with, that he gives us every day. And those conversations, those things that we're dealing with is going to be much more easy to handle. And, we're going to have to keep practicing it. It's not going to get easier the next day. But if both partners are willing to continually practice creating a space of grace in our relationships, that's just going to allow so much more room for God to work and us to not handle it ourselves.
You heard it first here on the Royal One podcast. Oh my goodness. That was such great advice. I have really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So how can we follow you on social media? Do you have a website? We need to follow you and hear more from you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're on Instagram at Creating Forevers with an S. And you can reach out to us there. We have a link in our bio for our relationship coaching. And we also have a website, creatingforevers.com. And mainly through Instagram, we tend to get couples to contact us, through our link in our bio, or send us a DM. We're in our DMs all the time answering questions. People have questions that they need answered and they don't want made public.
Mm-hmm.
And so feel free to DM us, seek counsel in us and what you're dealing with at that moment. And God has an answer through us for you. He will give it.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. I am going to refer everybody to you because this was so good. You had some amazing content today. I really, really
Glory to
enjoyed
God. Yes.
being on the show. This was so good. Oh my goodness. This was a really good conversation.
I had a blast. You asked some really good questions. I mean, really, really good questions that, it made me reflect on my personal relationship and my marriage. And so once we're able to use our experiences, it's fine that, I'm a certified relationship coach and that, I've taken these seminars and I read these books, but when I can give you my personal experience and I know what it feels like to go through these things, that makes the person receiving this information use it that much better and that much quicker, and it becomes validated.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, I will definitely have to have you back on the show because everybody want to hear more about relationships. So I will definitely have you back on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. You heard heard the music so you know what time it is. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining me for this episode of the Royal One podcast. I look forward to providing you with more encouraging content that empowers you to discover your purpose, embrace your identity, and engage faith tenaciously. If you have any questions you would like answered on the show about faith, purpose, relationships, or anything in general, email me at info@lasandrabarnes.com to ask your question. If you want to book a one-on-one session with me, just click the link in my show notes to schedule it. Make sure that you purchase Rejected to Accept It online. The link is in my show notes for that. And we want you to follow Frank on Instagram at Creating Forevers, and then go to his website, creatingforevers.com. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment on the podcast. You can follow me on social media at MissRoyalty143 on Instagram and Twitter, and Dr. Lysandra Barnes on Facebook. You've been listening to the Royal One podcast, where I empower women the royal way. Have a great day.